Hello everyone, it's Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show, episode 64, the top 10 best cards ever with an A. But anyway, this was the list which I've kind of wanted to make for a while, and last week I got a bunch of feedback which I'm very happy for. Whenever I get a comment on the little bell thing, I always go and click it and just look at it immediately, and this was actually suggested by a viewer and I thought, yeah, that's a list I can get behind, and it's quite a list. I'll even say that it is quite a list. Before we get started, however, if you notice, there's been some SoulForge content going up recently. It's not interfering with my Hearthstone content, as I said it wouldn't. The podcast that went up is something I do live every week, and that was more just for people who wanted to watch it live and missed it, so they can actually see it on a decent video format that isn't Twitch. But in terms of actual SoulForge proper content, I'm going to be doing a video based on budget formats for SoulForge pretty soon. So if any of you are thinking of even just trying out the game and don't really want to spend a bunch of time grinding because you want to focus on Hearthstone, which is understandable, it's very difficult to play multiple games a lot at the same time. So I'm going to be doing that video on one of the budget formats, which it only takes about a week to get into, and it's a lot of fun. So I'll be bringing on someone for that video, and we'll do a couple matches and hope that a couple of you actually do want to try out the game, because it's a really good game, but there just aren't that many people making videos for it. But anyway, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So, this list was one of the hardest lists I've ever had to make. To be honest, these are my notes. These are all things that could be on the list. That's a lot of notes. I crossed off a lot of stuff, I'll say that. Other things, just a fair warning, if you're expecting things like mind control to be anywhere near this list, I wrote it down. That was removed, I think, 40 cards ago. I think there's like 50 cards on this list. So I narrowed it down to 10 and it was very difficult. But I'm just going to mention a couple of the ones that narrowly didn't make the cut. And these people are really narrowly. Keep in mind that the criteria I'm going over is general power level and how good they were at their strongest, like in the metagame as well. So things like Argent Commander would be buffed up, even though the card itself wouldn't be that broken. It was really good in its format. Don't worry, Argent Commander didn't make it anywhere near this list, but it's just an example. So it's based a lot on the format they were in that actually allowed them to do the broken thing. So that's where some of these cards are actually coming from. It's not just raw power level, it's how good they were in the format they were good in. But anyway, I think it's 5? Is it actually 5? Yeah, it's actually 5 honorable mentions. The first one's 1 mana Shiv and Arcane Blast. Now, Arcane Blast was the original Shiv, which was a mage card, and then it was removed and shifted over to Rogue as a 1 mana card, and then it was nerfed to 2. So Shiv, Arcane Blast, honorable mention, didn't quite make it. Pint-sized Summoner, the one that reduced it by 2. Surprisingly quite powerful if anyone played back then. It completely dominated Arena, I remember that for sure. Turn 1 pint size was really hard to beat. Other things, 0-5 Pagel. People don't know a lot about this. Basically, Nat Pagel dominated Standard when it was a 0-4 and it drew at the beginning of turn. However, it turns out Pagel was a 0-5 at one point, which I think would break people's brain a bit here, but yeah, it was really broken, but it just wasn't as good as some of the other stuff on this list. Loatheb didn't make it. I was actually shocked. But it turns out nothing above 3 mana made it onto the list. Turns out cheap things that are broken are way more broken than expensive things that are broken, I guess. Flame Imp, the original. Not the 2 damage one, the one with stealth. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about some of these really old alpha ones. A lot of these actually do come from alpha. I'm pretty sure most of the list comes from alpha. Some of them are in beta. So, yeah, basically, it used to do 2 damage to yourself instead of 3, and it used to have stealth. Which, 1 was overpowered, and 2, it made no sense. I mean, how does an imp on fire have stealth? Whatever, anyway, so it was really broken. And the last honorable mention was Cultmaster. Cultmaster used to be a 3-4. It was I think it was definitely the best 4-drop they've ever made, by far, I would actually say. It was really good creature, one of the best minions they've ever made, definitely top 10 minions they've ever made. It was a format defining, it was super powerful, it drove aggro decks on its own, the rest would just control combo decks. It drove aggro decks on its own, it was really good, and then it was nerfed twice. First to a 4-3, and when it was a 4-3 it saw a bit of play, not that much, and then a 4-2 just saw 0 play. So 3-4 good, 4-3 probably balanced, but they had to nerf it because it wasn't going to affect constructed much if they did nerf it, but in Arena I think 4-3 was a bit broken, but we didn't have that information because the game wasn't out by that point. Anyway, so that's pretty much the honorable mentions. There's a lot of other cards on this list that people don't really know about, things like Druid of the Claw being a 4-7, but it's a laundry list of things, and it turns out just a lot of things people think are broken just didn't make the list. So I'll just throw that list away. But anyway, on to the number 10 slot. And by the way, the images are going to suck in this episode because some of these images I have to use, some of them I can't get, so I have to use newer ones and explain the difference. But some of these are just terrible. So this one's cut from like a 2p poster. Edwin Vancleef is number 10. Edwin Vancleef with stealth is 10. Now, to give you an idea, Edwin with stealth would be broken now. When you add into the equation Adrenaline Rush, Adrenaline Rush, 1 mana Shiv, Novice Engineer that's good, Conceal, like just as a storm count thing. You could actually, I remember there were combos where you could get 21 cleaves. Like, not even God draws. Like, you could actually go turn 3, Coin, Ad Rush, Prep, Shiv, Edwin. Like, yeah, so you get an 11-11 Edwin and draw 3 cards. For 0 mana. Like, for 3 mana, you play your Edwin, and you just played 4 extra cards for 0. Like, that's when Edwin was really broken. Back when all the other road cards were also really, really good. So Edwin was super busted, and it would be broken now, but it's nowhere near as powerful as it was in the past when you had all these crazy, crazy cards to go around. Now, on to Mind Control Tech. Now, unbelievably, Mind Control Tech is one of the only cards in the entire game that has ever been banned in tournament play. Along with Mana Spring Totem? It was a 4-mana 0-1 that reduced the costs. The card wasn't broken, it just meant that with Youthful Brewmasters and Knife Juggler you had an instant win combo, which you couldn't replicate outside of turn timer, so we just banned it. The other one was Druid, got banned because it was way too powerful at one point. And the third card that was banned was, or third section that was banned, was Mind Control Tech. Now if you just read Mind Control Tech, it says swap, and there's no restriction on it. The reason this was banned was because 1, Blizzard wasn't happy with it, and 2, it stopped anyone from playing anything more than 3 mana. Like, you play a 4-drop, and they play a 3-drop, and they just swap. It's always better than a 1-for-1 if you play it properly. So basically, it was a 3-mana 3-3 that just stopped your opponent from playing anything more than 3 mana. Like, there were actually games where you play Ragnaros, and you're super happy because it kills this guy, and then they play Mind Control Tech and you lose. So, anything above a certain amount of mana was unplayable. And in the case of Handlock, it was really hard, even with 10 mana giants. I mean, not 10 mana, 10-10 giants. It was really hard. 10-10 giants, and that was crazy. Like, 10 mana would be even nuts. Would just be crazy and stuff, but 10-10 giants were good, but Mind Control Tech was actually banned from the format when that was good, because it was just too strong and one of the best creatures they've ever made. So that gets the number 9 slot. Now the number 8 slot, somehow I found an animated golden picture of this. Someone's been keeping track of this one. I guess it went on the mantelpiece. Maybe it was an aggro warlock player from the beginning of beta. So anyway, I've got the shiny Blood Imp thing as I go to the wrong end of the camera. So the shiny Blood Imp is over here. Basically, Blood Imp was the most broken 1-drop they've ever made, to the point when if you played 2, your opponent just lost. And I'm actually not joking. Like, it gives global buff to everything and is a 1-1. A 1-1 was fine, you didn't really attack with it though. This opening was unbeatable, mostly. Turn 1, Blood Imp, coin Blood Imp. Good luck. My Flame Imps now have 4 life. Direwolf Alpha, I don't think it was even played back then, it was too weak in the deck. Void Walkers, 1/5s with Taunt. Knife Jugglers with 4 life. It was not a fair card, ever. And the main reason it was broken, actually, was that one, it was very hard to remove 2 of them. Like, you only had Phantom Knives, couldn't remove 2. So you needed a Spell Power Phantom Knife or a Blade Flurry just to kill Blood Imps, and Druid couldn't kill them very much. Druid was on the downside at this point, so it was pretty much just a Rogue was your contention. And Rogue couldn't really kill them very easily. If you didn't draw Blood Imps, you lost, and if you did draw both, you won guaranteed. One was a bit hit or miss, it depended a lot on the other draws. So the main reason it was broken was not that it was impossible to remove, but that it absorbed all the AoE damage. You play Deadly Poison Blade Flurry with 2 Blood Imps on the board. Now, nothing that has a base life total more than 1 died in that Blade Flurry. It absorbs damage, because of the way damage stacks actually on... Like, the way damage stacks in Hearthstone is that if there's a buff that goes away in a damage step, it absorbs the damage. So, Blood Imp was actually an AoE protection. Like, you could consecrate 2 Blood Imps, and actually it would do no damage to the rest of the stuff on his board, and you just take 15 damage on that turn. So, Blood Imp was definitely the strongest one drop they ever made, and very, very overpowered. Divine Favor. Now, this is Divine Favor at 2 mana. So, 2 mana, not 3. And the other change in the environment was that Paladin aggro was token aggro with 2/3 Knife Jugglers and 1/6 Imp Monsters and a lot of really small guys. Basically, you just went with token. You just played all of your stuff down, and then on turn 4 or 5, you played Divine Favor, draw 6 cards because the rest of the format was control or combo at the time, and some mid-range decks as well. So you just play everything, Divine Favor, draw 8, they wipe your board. And because you have 3 extra mana, right? So you just go guy. And then next turn, 5 guys, Divine Favor. You'd actually draw through your whole deck by like turn 8. So not only was it less mana, so you could play it and play more cards with it, not only was it less mana, which is actually relevant because it means you can top deck something. If you don't top deck Divine Favor specifically, it's in your hand, you can play the card you do draw for the turn and then play Divine Favor for an extra card. So that was where the mana was relevant, but also the format it was in was much, much better for Divine Favor than it is currently. So Divine Favor, definitely the best Paladin card they've ever made, that's for sure. Savagery, as I appear to have missed a card actually. Yep, I have missed a card. Okay, time for some in-video editing. All right, so this is something I've had to do a few times before. Not something I'm used to. How did I miss that? Yep, number 6 is actually Mana Addict, as we pull up a terrible image of Mana Addict. Anyway, so Mana Addict, and alright, so as soon as I bring this up, in one of the most contrived ways of bringing up a card I think I've ever done. When I bring this card up, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are like, what? Mana Addict? Really? It turns out Mana Addict, the old one at least, was 3 attack per spell. But that's not enough to make a card broken. The reason this is the best creature they've ever made, and I'm actually serious, the reason they've made the reason this is the best creature they've ever made is imagine a format where the 2 best decks are Druid Burn and Miracle Rogue. And I'm not talking about beta Miracle Rogue, I'm talking about alpha Miracle Rogue, like way out there. So you have 2 cards. Now it turns out neither of the decks played Leroy or anything like that, because Mana Addict was like, alright, so you're playing Druid. You go Mana Addict turn 2. If it dies, sure, it's 2-drop. If it doesn't die, however, if they play like their own 2-drop, then you go Wrath Face, because you could back then. Wrath Face, Innervate, like Wrath, you could just go Wrath, Innervate, Power of the Wild, and hit him in the face for like, what, 3, let's see, just the spells do 3, 6, 9, plus Power of the Wild triggers a 10, and base attack, 11, plus the Wrath damage itself. So you just dealt 14 damage on turn 3 with a burn deck. And if you went second, it was even crazier. Because then you just go Mana Addict turn 2, and then turn 3 you just go like Coin, Innervate. But it was crazy. You just hit him in the face for like 15 on turn 3 if they didn't kill it. Mana Addict was a must kill against Druid. And that was at its weakest. The other deck that used it was Miracle Rogue. Now, Miracle Rogue was infamous for hitting you in the face for 25 damage on turn 3 with Mana Addict, and I'm actually not joking. Like, you could have, another card on this list at some point is Conceal. Conceal has gone through 4 iterations. The original version was a 0 mana permanent one, which I can't find an image for because it's really old. Like, it was nerfed almost instantly. So 0 mana permanent Conceal on one creature. So turn 2, you go mana Addict, Conceal. Turn 3, coin, Adrenaline Rush. Coin, Adrenaline Rush, Shiv, Prep, like Eviscerate, Cold Blood. So what is that, like 6 spells? Just to give you an idea, that's like not even a God Draw. A God Draw is a 1-turn kill. But that's a variety of spells. You haven't drawn any 2-elves at this point, going second. So you haven't drawn any 2-elves at this point, and you've drawn a decent amount of cards with the Adrenaline Rushes and such. So what you've done is you've played 6 spells, which is 18 damage. You've also played an Eviscerate, a Shiv, and a Cold Blood, which is another 9 damage. So you just hit him in the face for 28 damage on turn 3. And that's not even a God Draw. An actual, like, a really good draw was a turn 3 kill with Mana Addict. The reason they nerfed the attack was because, and when the nerf happened, I did a patch review on it at the time, and I said, well, the nerf is because they want this ability to be combat focused and not, like, they want it to be help in the removal of creatures, not in the removal of players. That's the reason the card was broken. The card was basically a 2-mana finisher, which is not, it's not right. You should never have a 2-mana finishing card. So that's basically why Mana Addict was nerfed originally. It was just such a powerful card. Arguably one of the best cards ever made. That's why it is on this list. And also the last creature on this list. The rest are spells. Alright, so Savagery, and by extension, Bite and Claw. So Savagery is nowhere near what it is now. Now it's terrible. It's been nerfed twice. It used to be a 2-mana global. It was basically Blade Flurry for 2 mana, and you could. It was basically just Blade Flurry because you could hit him in the face as well. Actually, no, it's slightly better because you can. Yeah, it was better because you can attack his face post Savagery as opposed to you can't with Flurry. So if he has a taunt up, you can't deal that extra damage to him, and you need 2 durability for that. So Savagery is way better than Flurry in that regard. So you can attack post wipe. You can also deal double damage to one creature. If you really need to, and the buffs give you health now, at least. Alright, so there were 2 iterations of Savagery that made it broken. Now, when it was nerfed to 3 mana, and then the Claw was changed to what it is now, and Bite was changed to a 3 mana version of what it is now, so it was still really good, especially with Bite. But the original version of Savagery was this plus Claw, which was 1 mana 3 attack, no armor, and Bite, which was 4 mana 6 attack, no armor. So turn 3 was a Blade Flurry with Deadly Poison. Turn 6 was a Blade Flurry with, I guess, Perdition's Blade and 2 Deadly Poisons. 6 damage Blade Flurry. Which is crazy. So there was a deck that there was actually a deck with 26 spells and 4 creatures. It was like 2 Mana Addicts, maybe some Gadgetans, or some Ancient Allures, or something like that, and it was just spells. You just go spell, 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 because you just send all the burn to face, and as soon as you have to wipe the board, you go Bite Savagery and wipe him off the board while continuing to attack him. You could actually not race that deck, because they also had 5 mana Force of Nature with Savage Roar. So you just lost. You just lost on turn 8, and they just wiped your board over and over and over again. It was a very, very consistent deck, and it was also a very, very broken deck. So Savagery was definitely the piece that made it go round, along with this card, Innervate. Innervate is the only card on this list which will be referenced, and it is still the same as it is in the game now. There's another card which is in the game now, but there's a difference with it, which I'll get to. Now, Innervate is not broken now. I said when it's at its strongest. When Innervate was at its strongest was when you were doing stupid things like Gadgetan, Innervate, Savagery, Claw. Not in that order, obviously. Like Gadgetan, Innervate, Claw, Savagery. Draw 3 cards, Blade Flurry his board, and have a 5/4 on the board. That sounds pretty legitimate. So Innervate never did fair things back then. I mentioned Mana Addict earlier. Yeah, that's still work. Mana Addict with Innervate is not fair either. So there's a lot of unfair things you can do with free mana, it turns out. Fast mana is never fair. And it turns out the only reason that Innervate is remotely even in the game still is because all the broken things you can do with it have been removed. Like, the most broken thing you can do with Innervate at the moment is like Spectral Knight, I guess. So a lot of the things that you just couldn't deal with at all have been removed. And that's the reason Innervate isn't broken now, but at its strongest it was really, really absurd. Now, number 3, Preparation. Now, Preparation, this is the weird exception. It's in the game now, but the old prep actually reduced by 2. I think, wait a second, why is that stronger? No, it wasn't, but the point was that it reduced it by 2, but also the cards in the format were ridiculous in terms of spells. So, nowadays, this is reduced spells only. In Alpha, it was exactly Innervate almost, because you almost never innervated creatures. It's always spells. So, it was almost exactly Innervate. The difference is that it turns out Rogue and Alpha could do way more broken things with spells and fast mana than Druid could. The reason why Druid was the better deck was simply because it was more consistent. It was very, very consistent, and it just always did the broken thing every single time. Whereas Rogue was more of a broken when it does go off, not so much when it doesn't. Whereas later on they got more consistent but less powerful. So Preparation was just straight Innervate in the old Rogue decks. And they were really allowed to shine once Druid died down a bit, because then Conceal could actually work, whereas it just got Savagery off the board. So you couldn't do any Conceal plays, because it just Savagery wrecked your day. So once Druid left a bit, once they got nerfed a bit, Rogue came in, and you got Preparation, and you have Adrenaline Rush, and Shiv, and Conceal, and Edwin, and like, you just have all these really broken cards, and even Headcrack, along with some of the original spell damage stuff. So it's just a really, really crazy time of the game with some really, really broken stuff in it. And Preparation was basically Innervate back then, but better. Now, Conceal, I couldn't find an old image here because the image is too old. This is the current Conceal. Conceal's gone through 4 iterations. The last nerf it received was it used to be 0 mana on its current effect. Before then, it was 1 mana permanent to something. But there's a little known one from before that, which was got rid of fairly quickly for obvious reasons, which was 0 mana permanent Conceal on 1 guy. Now, we all know that putting permanent Conceal on something is broken, because you can do it with things like Questing Adventurer, and you can do it with things like Edwin's up to Swinging In, and Gadgetan's. Yeah, that was fair. You think Conceal Gadgetan is bad now? Yeah, try playing against 5 mana 4/4, 0 mana spell, make it permanently invisible. That draws cards. You literally just drew your whole deck in 2 turns. Because they couldn't even respond to it. If you weren't playing Hunter, which was pretty bad at the time, you just couldn't even respond to it. So, it basically just destroyed everything. And it's the kind of thing where Conceal was broken for multiple reasons. The other thing was, Gadgetan wasn't even the main thing people were doing with it, because it was too slow. I mean, Gadgetan was played in the deck in case you got a bad draw. I know, right? Like nowadays, Miracle with Gadgetan, good draw. Back then, oh, you're on the Gadgetan play, I feel sorry for you, man. You have to sit back drawing cards as opposed to just killing me. Yeah, Leroy was too slow in this deck. Killing you on turn 8 is nowhere near as good as killing you on turn 4 or 5. Or just hitting you in the face with a giant Questing Adventurer. So, basically, Conceal led to all the broken combo stuff. And it would be number 1, however it turns out this card needs other cards to function. The number 1 card doesn't, and is also an example of why Ancestral Recall should never be made in any game ever. Ancestral Recall is a magic card which was made once and never made again because it was 1 mana, draw 3. It turns out you don't have lands in this game, so 1 mana, draw 2 is pretty much just as good. Because 40% of the time you get lands, so instead you just had to draw 2 cards. Adrenaline Rush was never fair. It was never a fair card. None of the cards on this list are fair. But 1 mana, draw 2 cards is just not right. Like, Arcane Intellect sees play. Thought Steal sees play. For 3 times the mana. At worst, it's a 1 mana cycle. At worst. Like, this was absolutely crazy. This card was never fair. It should have never been made. It was way too powerful. It basically meant that you, as I said earlier, like I've been talking about Adrenaline Rush kind of on and off the entire list. where you could just go Mana Addict, Coin, Adrush, Prep, Shiv, Eviscerate, and just like, what? And Adrenaline Rush was one of the reasons why those even worked. Adrenaline Rush hands with Mana Addict and like Conceal were crazy. Like, you actually just played Mana Addict and concealed it. And if you were going second, then you go Coin, Adrush, draw more options, play more spells, cycle them, draw more cards, double Adrush. Like, double Adrenaline Rush hands were just silly. Like, it's so miserable that you could actually have games where it was like Coin, Defias, turn 2 Shiv, Adrush. It was miserable. And to be honest, I'm glad they removed it quickly, because originally, and this is another one that's not very known, but you can look it up, there is art sitting around for this. Adrenaline Rush used to be a basic. It was upgraded to an epic originally because before they removed it, which was in alpha, keep in mind. So all those people who think, oh yeah, remember Adrenaline Rush in beta? No, it was never in beta. It was never in beta. It never made it that far. Adrenaline Rush in alpha was a basic because they wanted it for the arena, which was originally the Forge. But then they realized that giving someone access to 5 Adrenaline Rushes in Arena is not fun. Because then you literally, if you have multiple of them, on turn 3 you just go Adrush, 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 and you just drew 5 cards. For 3 mana. Like, that's, even multiples of them isn't even bad, like you just play 2 cards to draw 3. And then it's 2 mana draw 3. It's broken when you play 2 of them and one of them isn't comboed. So Adrenaline Rush was never fair, and it's definitely a card which some people were like, I think it showed up in the Hearthstone database when Naxxramas came through. It was a bug that happened in the database because they were updating the cards, so Adrenaline Rush came up again. And a lot of people were panicking it was getting like reprinted essentially in the new set. It's like, oh my god, they're putting Adrenaline Rush back in. And people were like, oh, what's going on? And then it got removed and everyone was happy. And the reason everyone was happy is because when Adrenaline Rush is in the game, everyone is playing combo decks in Rogue. More so than normal. So basically everyone just plays Miracle and they're like, hey, I have Miracle and I always get Gadgets in and I don't even, like, the funny thing about Adrenaline Rush is that it's broken in Miracle, but if it wasn't for the rest of the Rogue cards that enable combos, like Shadow Step and things like that, it's actually an aggro card. That's the weird thing, because it's really, really cheap to draw cards in aggro, and it's also a combo starter if you really need it to in the cycles. So it's a really, really good card in aggro, but because of all the other cards like Shadow Step and such, it's broken in combo. It's broken either way, the card is busted. However, the reason it shows so much in combo is simply because you've got Shadow Step and Conceal and things like that. Those are combo cards. This is just flat draw. But anyway, so that's my top 10 list of most broken cards ever, I guess. Or just best cards in Hearthstone history. I'm curious, like, I do have a long list of honorable mentions, I'm just not going to go through them. If you guys are interested, I guess I'll do maybe when the next set comes out, like a top 20, and then if there are any changes in the top 10, I'll mention them. Which I doubt there will be. If there is, then I don't know what you're doing, Blizzard, seriously. So I might do like another top 20, not including top 10, once the next set comes out, because that'll be like 100 and so cards. Over 100 cards is what they said, so I might do it then. I don't know, you have to let me know whether it's something you even want to see. But anyway, thanks all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.